Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome again to the Lieberman House. Welcome back to Art Talking Business. When I called Michael Werner a few months ago to ask him whether he would be available for a talk about his life as one of the leading art dealers in the world, he immediately, spontaneously said yes, but he had one condition that he demanded very strictly. He hates to be bored. So he said, don't make a boring talk out of my talk this afternoon. So the condition was to find someone who is interesting enough to ask Michael Werner the right questions. And we thought very thoroughly about that question, and we discussed a list of persons that you all would know. I don't mention any names, but nobody was estimated by Mr. Werner as sufficiently guarantee that this would be an entertaining afternoon, since the expectations are very high, Sir Norman.
Oh my God.
Since,
OMG, you say of the...
since your name came up. So I'm very glad to welcome Michael Werner today and Sir Norman Rosenthal today, just Norman, for our afternoon talk. I think it would be pretentious and absolutely impossible to try to go through all the details of your lives, so I don't even try to. What I can say is we have today, this afternoon, two legends on the panel, and we are very glad to have you. And we have many questions. We do video on this, and we have many questions to send the video afterwards through the world. So please take that in mind whatever you want to say this afternoon. So thank you very much. This was my opening word. Your panel, the floor is yours.
Is dat eerst?
Where do you want to be, left or right? Links? Where do
Du
you
hast
want
es
to
schon.
choose? I take the other one. I take the other one, whichever you want. Okay, I go over here. And are we speaking English or sprechen wir Deutsch? What do we want to do?
You take the lead.
I'm sorry, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing with all the microphones. I'm a very disobedient person. I never agree to do what I'm asked to do, and I promised to lift up this kind of phallic object, but here we are. And so I've got this phallic object in my hand. So I went around the Hamburger Bahnhof, and there was this kind of funny the exhibition there is called Hello World, but actually should be called Hello World. No, Goodbye Picasso, Hello World. I think would be a better title for this exhibition, because it's a big accrochage of paintings that go back to the beginning of the 20th century. Because as we know, the Neue Nationalgalerie is closed, so they've done this big accrochage, which is all about the world, the art world. And now we have the art world that takes in, obviously, a whole wide world, because when Michael and I were young, in my time, from the perspective of London, where I was brought up, it was the art world was just New York, a tiny bit of Los Angeles, and possibly a tiny bit of London, a kind of vague memory of Paris, and Germany didn't even exist on the map. It wasn't there. I mean, nobody knew what it was, and I would say that the great Verdienst of Michael, one of the great Verdiensts, the greatest Verdienst of Michael, over a very long career, or quite a long career, he's still a young man, really. I like to think of myself as a young man. Do you like to think of yourself as a young man, Michael?
Not really.
Not really, I do. And I have lots of young friends which help keep me young. And the great Verdienst, the great contribution of Michael over a long, long period is somehow, probably more than any other mediator in Germany, is to put the legitimacy of German visual culture back on the map, which he's done fantastically. But of course he's done it not as an art historian officially, even though he is a lover of art, and I'm not an art historian either. People like to pretend that I'm an art historian, but I certainly never studied art, and I never studied art history either. So I've never been to an art school, and I never have done an art history examination in my life. I think both of us kind of just sort of, I hate to even call myself an art lover, but we kind of like it, don't we? We like art.
I
don't
can
know
agree.
why.
Hate and like. That is
All
what
right,
we do.
I know. You hate and like, and hate and like is a very big part of being. And anyway, people think of Michael as an art dealer. I've never really thought of him as an art dealer. I've just thought of him as a kind of art, ein Kunstkämpfer, a kind of person who is on a kind of like a leader at the front for those artists that he happens to believe in. And what do I want to say this? Anyway, I spoke to him this morning on the telephone, and this is my question. My first question is about to come to him after this little introduction, for which I apologize. And I said to him, I don't think of you as an art dealer, and you don't know it, and like I don't know anything about the art market, and you don't either. He said to me, I know everything about the art market, but nobody wants to listen to what I have to say. And so I'd just like to ask Michael to begin with, and I'm not quite sure where this discussion is going to lead, because neither of us have really prepared ourselves. What do you mean? What to you is the art market, and what is it that people don't want to listen to?
Well, you started your speech with what I understood as Berlin criticism. And I can add, because I looked at a news, TV news thing yesterday night, and there was a director of the modern part of the Preußischer Kulturbesitz, Mr. Kittelmann, who said what I now say. He said there was this brilliant artist in the 20s or 30s, in the 30s, who went to Indochina.
He went to
Indochina, and
a German artist.
A German artist from Berlin, and he's in the show. And he went to Indochina, and there he had a big influence on the Indo-Chinese art, because he changed the flat perspective into into perspective. That's what he said. And I found it pretty amazing.
Did he also talk about a strange artist who dominates the new presentation? An artist who some of you will know as the kind of husband of, if you're very intelligent and well sort of read in the world, an artist called Heinrich Vogeler. Did he talk about him as well?
No.
Do you know about Heinrich Vogeler?
Yeah, Vogeler is from the change of the century into the revolution. He went to Russia.
But then he went to Russia.
Yeah, no.
And he did these very strange paintings in praise of Stalin, etc. And
he invented the simultaneous painting. Ich muss mich an das Englische erstmal gewöhnen. Er hat erfunden das Simultanbild.
Simultaneous painting.
Yeah.
What is a simultaneous painting?
It is some structure, like a little bit cubistic or so, and then different stories on one painting. And he is very interesting. The other guy, who might be interesting, I do not.
Do you know his name?
No, I forget the name. I mean, the one Kittelmann mentioned is a victim. He's a victim of the Nazis. I think it's an interpretation I do, because he happened to be homosexual, so he left Germany and started to go into the exotics. And how I see it, he ruined the culture in Indochina. That's what I wanted to say. Or at least, if not the culture, then the painting.
But you still haven't answered my question about this leading, because, we're supposed to be talking art, talking business. What is it that defines an art dealer today? What is an art dealer? Are you an art dealer?
Sure, I'm an art dealer, but you cannot define, because everybody who wants to be an art dealer is an art dealer. You have a variety of a couple of thousands, you know. Yeah. Also, it's like life, you know. There are stupid art dealers and intelligent ones. I mean, you cannot define. Huh? An art dealer has no function as an individuum, except if he has one, you know. And culturally, art business is important for the creation of art, because otherwise there wouldn't be any art.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you think, is there any such thing? Is there a definition of
At
an
least
art?
in the modern times.
Is there even the definition of the word artist?
No. No. Everybody who thinks he is an artist is an artist. It's a question of how do you see yourself. I mean, I'm not good with definitions. I do not even believe in definitions.
Yeah. So when Uncle
it's
Joseph
for science,
said,
for the
so
science.
when Uncle Joseph talked about everybody is an artist, what did he mean, do you think? Are you one of his...
No, you know, I started my first gallery was in '63, and I started earlier to be interested in art because I worked as an employee in a gallery. And boys, the quote was everybody is an artist, I already found silly because it was a little bit advanced. But before this quote, he taught the students in the academy that if you take a canvas in oil color, you're lost out already. So I came to Cologne from Berlin. I escaped Berlin because you couldn't do any business, and Berlin was comfortable at the time, 59. You could find a parking place in the middle of Kurfürstendamm.
Were you actually born in Berlin?
No, I'm from Nauen, which is the outskirts, but I'm
Now in the outskirts of Berlin, somehow.
Yeah, it's Brandenburg. Huh?
So
But the reason is my parents were from Berlin, and I'm 39er, so it was soldier production, and the
do you have any memories of the bad days at all?
Yeah,
Personal memory?
we went and looked at the bombardments.
Did you enjoy them? Children used to enjoy them, didn't they?
Yeah.
They loved the,
yeah.
I mean, my
Yeah.
friend Karl-Heinz Bohrer wrote a beautiful book where he talks about, he's probably your age as well and our age, and he sort of remembers, these kind of night sky with the fireworks, basically.
It's adventure, and even much more brutal things. Like my mother had to carry me away because I wanted to look at a head lying around there. She just took me out. I was curious to look at the.
And also sounds like brutal. Almost sounds like proto Baselitz, proto Schönebeck.
Baselitz was in the countryside. There nothing happened much except the Dresden thing. Huh?
Yeah, but he sort of kind of remembers, he tells me. So, I mean,
war is a fascination, and the thing is, war is a fascination, and it's, over many centuries, war was sort of important for the cultures. And so today, since there is no war we are aware of, because we do not live in Syria or somewhere, war still is just a sensation, and for kids, it is a sensation and an adventure.
I'm sure. So, I mean, did you want to be, I mean, a lot of art dealers that I know, good art dealers that I know, initially wanted to be artists, but somehow felt that they couldn't do it, and therefore that's how they became art dealers? Did you ever want to be an artist?
Not really. I had a little mansard upstairs, and it was always tough. So now I'm 15, 14, no? And it was always tough to get the girls you wanted. So I established an easel and bought a little bit of color, and I started to paint.
You have
And then I invited the girls. It didn't really work. Huh?
The famous line, "Come and see my etchings," and things like that. That's a famous line in English parlance, you know. It's a kind of shorthand. But you didn't really want to be an artist, ever?
I would have liked to be an artist because I was dyslexic, so which means at the time I was a dumb scholar.
So where did you meet the legendary Mr. Springer, for example? How did you fall into it? I mean, I've got quite a good way of describing how I fell into the art business. I actually started my own career working for a famous dealer. But so you start in London by accident, by pure accident.
Same with me. I was in gymnasium. I didn't make it because, like I said, I was dyslexic. I learned lots of things you need in the art business because I had all the three best Schüler. Huh? What is Schüler? Pupils. Huh?
Pupil.
Where my close friends, they made my homework. So you never can be an art dealer if you have not people to do the work.
Behind you. You need people.
Yeah. And, I was specifically in a bad situation because I was dyslexic, as I said. So in gymnasium, the only teacher who would talk to me was a professional painter, Mr. Geccelli, who is known a little bit.
Geccelli.
Yeah.
Even I've heard the name.
And I was I became sick. I was in a hospital, and he visited me, and brought me a magazine, Do, which was a special issue with the art world in Europe. Huh?
This is in the late 50s or something, huh?
Yeah, so I looked at the photographs. There were still people, dealers in some photograph from Sotheby's, and people with a bowler and so. Three-piece suit, monocle, and all that. And I looked at it, and I figured, this is your word. So I came, I grew up in Mülheim-Ruhr. It's in the Ruhr area, and there's nothing. And,
Still, you've managed to find one of the more interesting grand old men I don't know whether he was a grand old man then, but certainly you managed to find Rudolf Springer. How did you find him?
I took this magazine, which Geccelli gave me.
You were how old then?
Almost 17, or 17,
So kind of
yeah.
teenager.
So then I looked at the photographs of the dealers, and then I picked the ones, and there was also a national structure because I was in a naturwissenschaftliche Gymnasium, and so we had only English, and I spoke about five words of English. So I wrote an English letter. I worked very long on it, a standard letter to each of the faces I liked, and not the French. I liked the French very much and the Italian, but I couldn't write them in English. I thought.
There were a couple of interesting Jewish dealers who came to Berlin, I think, back in already straight after 1945. Do you know their names? Do you know who I'm talking about? I can't remember their names.
Berggruen.
What?
Berggruen.
No, not Berggruen, no.
To Berlin, to work in Berlin?
To the first exhibitions, and I just at this moment can't remember their name. I'd have to go to my library at home, but I do. Who had, who showed people like Werner Held and all those sort of artists. What? But exactly, Gerd Rosenthal,
yeah.
Exactly.
But he was an auctioneer.
What?
He was an auctioneer.
He had a.
But he had a gallery.
He had a gallery.
Yeah, and Rudolf Springer, he was running the Rosen's gallery before he opened his own gallery. It's true, yeah.
Thank you for this very learned and esoteric bit of information. Thank you. Die Leute sind doch gebildet hier. Which is good to know, isn't it? Gerd Rosen, he was called. I'd forgotten his name. Couldn't reconstruct. But did you know him, for example? Did you ever meet him?
No, he was an old gentleman, and I was really young, and I didn't know anything. I wouldn't have even known what to ask this person.
So you arrived, therefore, Rudolf Springer somehow kind of. How did he pick you out?
He was an outsider. He was sort of the black sheep of the family, and all his brothers died in Second World War, so he inherited with his sister a fortune, and he spent it have an interesting life. So He was really special, and the other speciality, or one other speciality he had, was he liked to, what he probably thought was educating young people. I felt like he liked to torture young people. But you know, I knew he was very, very
And I knew him as an
interesting.
oldish man, you know. Was he the same always?
No, he
As
was
a younger man?
I don't know.
I got to know him, I suppose, in the very late 70s, early 80s in Berlin. But I don't, you know, he was already quite old then.
Yeah, for me, it was not important at the time who somebody was. I was happy that somebody took me and dealt with me, you know. And over the years, he became my Ersatzvater. And he was
What did you have to do for him?
It was not that I had to do anything.
Did you have to
know.
pack the paintings? Or
I
did you
started
actually
to
sell?
cook tea, and I cut the passepartouts and so. But that was not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that after a week, he told me about the Jewish problem in Germany.
But you didn't know anything about it?
No, I came from Mülheim an der Ruhr, and when I was in first school grade, you know, we saw all the kids were shown a movie. I think it was Alain René, Nacht und Nebel, I think it was about Dachau. You know what kind of information I got from the movie with 6 years? I got the information that the bastards, the American bastards, they would have dead bodies with a bulldozer into a mass grave. That's the message I got. So that's my
Education. Education about history.
So after a week in Berlin with Springer, he invited me for a Bockwurst, you know, and explained to me...
Currywurst or Bockwurst?
Bockwurst.
You know about the history of Bockwurst, by the way?
No, I took a Bockwurst.
There is a whole history of currywurst. You know,
Okay.
it was invented
Tell
by
us,
the English.
tell
Did
us.
you know? The history of the currywurst it was invented by the English who came to with all these funny things like Worcester sauce. I've never had a currywurst in my life. I love sausages, but I've never eaten a currywurst. They sound to me disgusting. And they found German sausages, the British soldiers who they were, you know. They found German sausages, and in order to make them palatable, they poured, you know, tomato ketchup and what they call Worcester sauce. You know, do you know what this Worcester sauce is?
I know Worcester
This kind of
sauce,
slightly soury, vaguely oriental sauce on top of and a bit of curry powder. And that is the story of currywurst. There's a whole little book about it somewhere, which I once had to read when I was writing a little essay about early Baselitz. I did a little bit of research, inverted commas. You know, you can do amazing things on the internet nowadays. I did a little bit of research on the origin of the currywurst, which is Berlin too, you know.
Well, you see, I took a Bockwurst because...
Yeah, I prefer Bockwurst too. I like Bockwurst. I love Bockwurst, you know. But, you know, Baselitz loves the Currywurst. And he has his favorite, you know, booth on the Kurfürstendamm, you know, halfway up the Kurfürstendamm.
But he hates Berlin. Why does
I know,
he
but
like
he
currywurst?
loves currywurst, and he goes to one place for his currywurst, and I can't stand it. I mean, the very idea of it makes me want to kotzen, you know, to be sick. Anyway, there we are. Carry on. Where were we? We're still talking about Rudolf Springer. I'm very interested in your time with Rudolf Springer. And then about how you let go of Rudolf Springer.
Well, why I had the currywurst, he told me something very disturbing, because he said, I tell you where you are now, you know, and said, now you are in the middle of what is left over because before we burned all the Jews. But they didn't only burn the human bodies, they burned part of our culture. And I was sort of shocked, first, how he talks, you know, and second, what was the message, you know? And so I asked him, yeah, terrible. What do you mean by burnt part of our culture? And he said, the part of the culture which we burned left only goys over. that's what we have now, and that's where you live in. That was the first lesson of Mr. Springer. And for me, it was amazing because I never thought about this before. I never knew anything about this. And then, you know, I made an interpretation of all his movements towards me, towards clients, towards everybody. And I always had this in the back of my head. And he was a negative person. He disliked many people. But he was
He had a certain sarcasm, certainly.
Yeah, he disliked many people, mostly the authorities. He was extremely critical, also with artists. And he had one artist, Hermann Bachmann, in the gallery, who was the most intelligent artist. And he was the only person who could compete with in a discussion with Springer. And he mostly won over. And
I
now,
don't even know Hermann. Am I
No.
uneducated not to know Hermann
No,
Bachmann?
no,
Who in this room knows Hermann Bachmann?
no,
Not a single hand has gone up. Peter Klaus, you know Hermann Bachmann?
he was a professor at the HBK, and there were many professors at the HBK. He was an interesting person because he was an infantryist, and when he was 18, he went with a war, with a machine to Moscow, just before Moscow. He came back almost when the war was over, and he had no scratch, and that describes him perfectly. And he was a really interesting painter who didn't make it, so to say.
Warum vergessen? Why forgotten?
Well, because he couldn't continue. You know, he made paintings in, you know, it was about color,
Abstract?
temperature. Yeah, it was not abstract. The origin was a sitting man in a chair or something, and it appeared like, you know, Flecken, color Flecken.
But would you want to kind of, I mean, you know, the famous art dealer, Mr. Springer, could you imagine giving him some kind, you know, because art is about memory. I mean, that's one of my little things. Art is about remembering things. Would you agree with that, by the way? At the bottom, art is only about memory. Even art that was only made 2 weeks ago is about remembering what happened 2 weeks ago, let alone what happened centuries ago.
Wow, that's
Would you
bad
think-
for me, Norman, because I forget almost everything after 2 seconds now.
No, I don't believe it. You're clearly, you couldn't even remember this name. What was he called? Hermann
Bachmann.
Bachmann. Would you be happy to see a room of his work or a wall of his work now?
I have a little painting in my office, and I sit so that I look at it. It's not that I admire him, you know, but I have this painting. It's
But would you like to see a wall of his paintings on the wall?
No. It's I'm not a fantast, you know. The guy is gone. He didn't make it, you know.
But, you know, sometimes those who didn't make it can be reinvented.
Yeah, well, why?
Well, because they are. I mean, you know, one is constantly reinventing. When you make an exhibition, you are somehow reinventing.
I don't work like you. You do great installations. I do them different.
No, yeah, but you've done a lot of reinventing. I mean, reinvented. I mean, I've got a big list of all the artists, but I mean, if I think of late Picabia, nobody gave a damn about late Picabia until you started putting them on the wall.
Norman, I needed to make a living.
No, don't give me that bullshit. Don't give me that bullshit.
No, it is not bullshit. When I bought my first Picabia, it was at a gallery in Paris who was run by 4 people, and it was called La Galerie Quatre Mouvements, the Quatre Mouvements. It was
Quatre mouvements.
Yeah,
4 movements.
It was 3 Jewish people, and
As
one
usual.
probably also Jewish man, German man from Dresden. But I think he left in the Nazi time. You know, anyway, I don't know. It was 4 people, and I used to go there because it was interesting to talk to them. I didn't have money, so I couldn't buy.
You spoke French?
No,
What language did you speak? English?
German.
German?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, they were Jews, so they spoke German.
And so, you know, it was a a place to go. I would sort of go.
Where was it, on the Rive Gauche? Or
And one
was it on the Rive Gauche somewhere? Or?
Yeah, yeah, Rue de l'Université. And then, you know, I would come in the evening, mostly late, and I would go the Quartier Rive Gauche with the galleries. I would go certain places, and my first Picabia stood, you know, they closed the gallery and they put a painting directly behind the door, the glass door, and had it lit. And it was a kitsch painting with a nude, you know, from the photographs, the so-called North African paintings. And I was fascinated. It was a nude with a theater mask next to it, big. So I was so excited that I went there. I knew they would not open before 10 o'clock or around in Paris, 10:30. I started to go there at 8, not to miss it when the guy would come in. Then I had in the near cafe, I waited and waited until somebody went in, and I said, "How much is the painting?" And it was 1,200 marks. Was a painting like this.
Which year are we talking about?
And you know what I thought?
What year are we talking about roughly?
70. Yeah. You know what I thought? I didn't think, oh, what a masterpiece. I thought 1,200, that you can sort of
Umsetzen.
you can get 1,200 somehow. And if you have it for 1,200, you can at least have 4,000 for it. If you sell it.
And did you?
No, I had kept it. But that was a thought.
That's why I think you're not an art dealer. Because you thought you could.
But I couldn't have
Real
sold.
art dealers would have sold
I
it.
would have sold it, but I was not a sales. I'm not good with selling. I just, you know, I learned
How
very.
can you call yourself an art dealer if you're not good at selling? Buying
I
is
have a-
easy.
I have a-
Anybody in this room who's got money can go out and buy things. But
Sure.
the difficult. I mean, the reason I know I would be a hopeless art dealer, I mean, really hopeless, and you know, is that I would not know how to sell. It'd be very easy to go out and buy if I had the money, and, you know, and even go and find amazing things at the floor market, at the flea markets, and so on.
Same
but
for me.
what I cannot do is sell. I would not know how to persuade some gullible person to buy a picture, let alone for 4,000, let alone for 4,000 Deutschmarks or whatever it is, let alone, you know, 4 million or 16 million like Larry Gagosian seems to be able to do so easily. You mustn't, I mean, aren't you kind of jealous of people who can do that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. How do they do it? How do they do it?
I have no idea.
You must have some
It's a-
idea.
it's
you
a-
you
it's a
told
talent.
me you knew everything about art dealing.
It's a talent, I tell you. You know, I have
What do you mean
met
a
people who
talent?
can sell like crazy. You know, my ex-wife in New York, she did.
Mary,
Yeah, she did.
Mary,
She had a
whom you met thanks to me. You know that, don't you?
No, thanks to Polka. Sorry, I have to.
No,
yeah.
I think you met him thanks to me. I mean, my fantasy is that you met Mary on the first at the opening of Zeitgeist.
There
But
were-
maybe is that
there-
not,
the- so-
maybe that's my own fantasy.
So there were two speculative people, you and Polka, because Polka, when the what was the show here in Berlin?
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist. When
1982.
when it was closing, everybody left, and there was no
at
tax.
the opening, closing after the opening.
Yeah, and-
we all went to the Paris bar.
No, there was no taxi. And Polka managed to get me a taxi, and he pushed Mary first, and then me in and closed the door and let us go.
But on the other hand, if there had been no Zeitgeist and no opening, there would have been no Polka to close the taxi door.
Yeah, it's true.
So in that sense, we're both responsible. Polka and me, my God,
Yeah.
what an honor that I can put into my
You see,
biography.
you see.
Polka and Norman, what a thing, huh? But anyway, and it seemed to me, you know, the most unlikely, you know, there was my dear friend Christos, and who co-curated that show, and you know, when they somehow heard that, you know, you and Mary, it seemed to, because Mary seemed to me like the archetypal American girl, you know, of, you know, kind of, she was the new glamorous lady. Well, I mean, she was kind of, she did look like Cleopatra. She looked like Nefertiti, didn't she? A bit, to me.
I don't know.
Anyway, she was the big girl on the block who was trying to kind of push out Castelli and Ileana. And and you were this kind of serious, slightly gloomy German here in Berlin. The gloomy German, and this Mary, she still speaks like that. There should be, it's kind of like this amazing liaison, but very beautiful. I'm sure you must have had the most wonderful time. But
why do we talk? Oh, I wanted to.
Anyway, just to say,
she was.
This is all going on the record, I see.
she was the American art dealer.
Yeah.
She was into selling.
Yeah. So how did she do it?
She prepared her diary and had collected like 30 telephone numbers of people she thought about could buy from her show. And in the morning she would go into the office, and for the whole day she would insist that she gets all these people, which is difficult in America because everybody is busy all the time,
But she was kind of sexy girl.
So
at
this
that time.
way,
even now.
Well,
Even now, she is a kind of, she's got lots of.
you don't want me to
I
get
want to
that
carry
the message.
Carry on. Sorry, if I interrupt, you shout.
And I tell you what I saw. I saw that quite a lot of people didn't like her. And you know why? Because she insisted to do the telephone call. So that made me very sure that my way, not to take care about selling anything, was the better way.
Was better or worse?
The better way. The better way of selling paintings is not to try to sell.
Explain yourself. And I need a bit more explanation about the better way of selling is not to sell. Is it just
Not
by sitting
to-
on it
not to try to
Fafner,
sell.
like Fafner on the gold in the
No.
ring?
This
Does
is a-
anybody in this room know,
Norman,
the ring?
you start to misinterpret. I said to try, not to try to sell. If you do not try to sell, you have to find another way to make the deal, right? So if you tell, for example, somebody you cannot have the painting, he immediately is interested.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I try to explain. It's very simple. Everybody knows that, except you, because you.
Well, I can't afford to buy. If I remember coming to his gallery for the very first time. When I'd met Christos, my friend Christos Joachimidis, who recently died. So he sent me to Cologne, and I went to your little gallery in the Gertrudenstrasse, which is just behind the Opera House in Cologne. And I went through into this little courtyard and up a tiny little staircase, and I came into a room barely half the size of this. Is that right? Would you not agree? And not much higher either.
No, much smaller.
Much smaller.
You talk about the Berlin.
No, Gertrudenstrasse.
Oh, that was much smaller.
Yeah, much smaller. Yeah. And there I saw a few.
Sankt Apan.
I saw
a
few Kiefer books on the table. That was what you happened to have at that moment. And I think I can't remember. I think I even asked the price. As my memory, they were 400, 300 Deutschmarks. Is that possible?
Yeah, was an interesting show.
But I didn't have the money, and I wasn't. If I'd been clever, I would have put everything down. I'd be a rich man.
This was interesting because this is how things really happen in the art world. I had the little gallery, and I had already Markus Lüppers, who started out painting Nazi symbols.
Yeah.
And he was very much attacked to be a Nazi because of that. And also the helmets and the SS caps and all that. And he was attacked because of it, but in addition to that, he was a rocker type, and he had a beautiful wife, and they went out in the night places every night, and immediately, in a crowded Berlin pub or so, somebody would start to get close to his wife, and immediately there was a fight. Mm-hmm. And so these two things made him impossible, the impossible artist. And now this show you talk about with the books of Kiefer and that one painting, Notungsschwert, which is Nibelungenlied, made the gallery into a Nazi gallery because it was too much for the public from Marienburg and Meerbusch and so, And nobody came to the gallery anymore because of the first Kiefer show I did. And I had talked to my then wife, the first wife, which was Marcus' wife before. She had a great talent, She was communicative to
Everybody, huh?
enormously, enormously. Everybody liked her. So I knew she could help, but she wouldn't help. So I asked her to help, and she said no, as expected. And I closed this place because I went away around in Cologne, and I rented a defunct little castle to get her into the game.
I remember
Because
that.
she refused to go to the gallery, so
Became the Cavendish Castle, is that right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. That's the Werner Castle, not the Cavendish
I
Castle.
know, but in my head, the Cavendish Castle.
Anyway, it was the first time I lived in a castle because Baselitz was the
Already
very
in his
first.
castle.
Yeah,
He was the
I
first.
liked this idea very much that he took. He took an enormous castle with 200
Huge.
places.
200 rooms and so. I don't know.
Mine was a little cube, very cute and
With
beautiful.
a nice little moat, I
Yeah.
remember. With a kind of little
And then my
water around the outside.
Yeah, and then my wife made a big party for 250 people, and everybody came, the Belgians, the Swiss, and so on, and I made money, and I could pay my rent,
If you remember my first visit to your gallery, I don't think you were particularly nice to me when I came. You probably thought, who is this obscure, ridiculous, sort of English person? Do you have any memory of me coming to your gallery?
I like everybody who talks a lot because I can't talk so good.
But I didn't think I probably didn't say a great deal. I just sort of sniffed around.
No, you said a lot.
Did I?
Yeah.
Do you remember what I said?
No.
What might I have talked about? But I probably told you about
I don't know even when we saw each other
It would have
first
been
time.
in '74 when I had to make this big decision. I did this. It was when Britain was not Brexiting. What is the opposite of It was not Brexit, but Brinning. It just had gone into the European community, and I suddenly got this job in London at the ICA because somebody discovered I could speak German. So I was sent off. At that time, I knew nothing about contemporary German art at all. And somebody said, so they gave me about £100 to go and do a big tour of Germany. So I did this big tour of Germany. I first went to Hamburg, then I went to Berlin, where I met Christos, and I went to Munich, and then I went all the way up quasi the Rhine, and I ended up in Cologne and Düsseldorf, sleeping on people's floors and so on and so forth. And then in this time, I decided there were two, I hate the expression positions, but das sagt man hier in Deutschland, Positionen, two kind of artists whose profile really made me sit up properly and made me think. And one was the profile of Beuys, and the other was the profile of Baselitz, I have to say. And you must have shown me some paintings by Baselitz in the gallery. Because I think
Not only Baselitz.
But also Baselitz especially. And that was the thing that kind of got me. And
Good.
I was sort of captured. And so I came back and I had to make a choice between, as it were, the Baselitz world, that's or the world of Beuys. That's to say the Fluxus political art world, and you must understand in 1974 was still quite close to the world of 1968, so I thought this was the better way forward for because the ICA is not that big a place, and that's where Beuys did that famous blackboard environment. I have to boast a little bit because he said, Norman, I want 3 blackboards, and I want just to talk to the people, democratic and all this kind of the democracy, and said, where do I get blackboards from? So I managed somehow to find some depot with blackboards in London, and I found 100 blackboards in a depot, in a school, and a kind of discarded school depot. So I took all 100 blackboards. I found a little minivan, shoved them all into a van, brought them to the ICA, and now you can see them here in the Hamburger Bahnhof. You know the piece, I'm sure you know. So that's how that piece happened. I love boasting about that, and when I go and visit it, I shed a bit of a tear.
The longer you talk, the more I remember.
What?
Probably what I did to talk to you was you are horrifyingly mainstream. That's what I'm for sure.
Horrifyingly mainstream.
Beuys was a disaster because he taught the students not to paint. I only had painters in the gallery. And so probably, if I remember right, I told you my theory at the time, which are still, I think, is gültig. What is it in English?
Relevant,
Viable,
relevant.
Yeah.
Gültig, yeah, relevant.
The German painters is the future, I probably said. It's a future because it's a very strange and interesting mixture of two cultures, the American and the Russian. You know, the Düsseldorf school is heavily influenced by American modern painting culture, you know, but the most of the guys who are important come from the East, except boys, you know, they come from the East bloc. Huh?
Yeah, yeah.
In Berlin is the same. All these people who come from in Berlin, everybody came from the East, basically, huh? And in the East, they were influenced by Russian culture, and when they were young kids in school, they knew what kvass was, but they didn't know what Coca-Cola was. And that is the story I'm absolutely sure I told you.
Yeah, I think I'm beginning. Yeah.
Good.
And so I was too mainstream, and so I'm sorry, I do apologize. But also, I'd hoped to persuade the Serpentine Gallery, because there was a big, you know, thanks to the Goethe Institute, which had loads and loads of money, there was this big German festival going on at the same time, and I tried to persuade the Serpentine Gallery to do an exhibition with, you know, Lüpertz, Baselitz, etc., etc. But they decided that there was some rather boring English painter, I could even mention his name, who became a bit of an enemy of mine later on, called Paul Huxley, who was somehow on the committee there, and he decided to do some painters. I called him the Badezimmermeister, that's all I remember. He painted bathroom paintings. Totally every painter in that exhibition is forgotten. So I'd hoped to do the two exhibitions, but then a few years later when I was, you know, things are, I'm not a religious person, but somehow I think things are, certainly as far as my own life is concerned, my own biography is concerned, are willed from somewhere. I don't quite know where, whether from down there or up here. So I was still able to do that show, A New Spirit in Painting, in London, which was somehow quite effective.
Yeah, you did a lot of good things to the situation, that's for sure. But for me it was...
I even got a Bundesverdienstkreuz. There we are.
Good.
I was very proud.
But there's a difference. For you it was an interesting case, amongst others, and for me it was existential. You know, when I persuaded Annie de Decker to do a Baselitz drawing show, this was a victory of a war, you know. This was very different. It was existential.
Just in terms of enough to...
Nobody knows who Annie de Decker is, maybe, but she was the representative of the concept of minimalist.
So tell me how, when you first came across Schönebeck and Baselitz, I put those artists in that particular order consciously, were they, when you were still working, I'm going for Rudolf Springer, were they people that you just, contemporaries that you met, that they were almost like a hobby thing that you did in the evening when you opened your little gallery, apart from Richard?
No hobby, no.
Yeah?
No.
How did you kind of separate from Springer? Had you already separated from Springer when you opened?
He fired me.
He fired you?
Yeah.
When you opened and so you met Benjamin Katz and yourself?
No, wait, I tell you, I mean, I don't know, it's all about my biography. We should talk a little bit about what was it? Art business.
What is the art business? Yeah. But I mean, you know, in the end, all we can talk about is ourselves.
I tell you the story with firing, and then I change a little bit. The firing happened. I had a very interesting art dealer also, who at that time was a poet, and before that he was a beer brewer. And his name is Franz Dahlem. He was very, very implemental in Germany because he sort of put boys on the table. Huh? Yeah. And he raced through Germany and he emptied apartments of their content and put boys on the wall, you know, sort of. And he had a friend, painter from Munich, Uwe Lausen, and persuaded Rudolf Springer to do a show. And I said to Rudolf Springer, why do you do the show? This is really not good. And he said, as long as I own the gallery, I decide who makes the exhibition. So then he was traveling all the time, because nobody buys anything in Berlin.
It's a Springer.
For Springer, yeah. So I was alone, and in came Harald Quandt, who was at the time the richest man in Germany.
Quandt, yeah,
yeah.
I somehow remember that name too.
Yeah, no, somehow he was a son of whatever. And he only came because Franz Dahlem has asked him to buy a painting of Lausen for 300 or 500 marks. And the relationship between Franz Dahlem and Harald Quandt was that Berlin at the time was the only city with nightlife until the morning. All the other cities in Germany had to close at 12 o'clock. So there was a lot of sex and rock and roll going on here. And all the rich people from West Germany had big apartments in Fasanenstraße or something like that. And because of the nightlife and the sex and the rock and roll. And so Franz, as a poet, was part of this nightlife. And, he knew all these people.
He's a very annoying man, too. He would come, when he heard I was doing this German show, he came to London. And he kept saying, Imi Knöbel, Imi Knöbel, Imi Knöbel.
He liked
nearly
Imi
drove me
Knöbel.
mad. He nearly drove me insane.
Yeah, he liked Imi Knöbel, that's true.
Already then, huh?
Yeah.
He said, you cannot do an exhibition without Imi Knöbel. I can't tell you, he must have rung me up 30 times, and I think he came to London 3 times to see me.
He was not successful?
No.
Wow, you're a hero. Huh?
I'm a hero.
Yeah. You resisted.
I resisted.
Anyway, to make the story short, I said to Mr. Quandt, this all is not really interesting. Let's go to the basement. I tried to sell him, let's say, a maths collage of Schwitters, but he didn't want to buy art. He wanted to buy his ticket for the nightlife. And so he left. He didn't buy anything. And next few days later, Augstein came, same story. Then
Augstein.
Yeah, and then my boss came back from his trip, and he didn't talk to me in the morning. He didn't say good morning, and I knew, well, something is wrong, and it must be this. If I would have sold some Schwitters, there was no problem whatsoever, but I didn't sell.
They were so cheap at the time, too, weren't they?
So after 10 minutes not saying anything, he said to me, Mr. Werner, I think our time is over. And I said, well, somehow it fits. So I left, and then I opened the opposite, that with Benjamin Katz. I've opened.
But did you know Baselitz and Schoenberg
Yeah,
already?
sure. No, it was Baselitz, yeah.
Did Springer knew them too?
Not at the time. When I was fired, I had a gallery with Benjamin. We made the first Baselitz show. We produced a Scandal. But we had nobody who buys, and the only one who bought a painting was Springer from the show, from the Benjamin Werner thing.
So he still had a little faiblesse for you. Otherwise, I mean...
we had always... he was my Ersatzvater, remember? So you have fights with your father, but...
He threw you out,
do
but he
not
still bought a
separate.
picture.
You do, and it ended. It never ended. He was ambitious to become 100. We thought about this. I said he always tried to say, "Hey, Mr. Werner." We didn't call each other by name, by first name.
Herr Werner.
Yeah, Herr Werner. You have to have a little bit of discipline. He was totally unorganized and undisciplined. And you want to get older, and so you cannot.
He had that kind of. Did he have that gallery that I remember when I was a student under the bridge at round the corner from just beyond the Kempinski? Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
where
but
the gallery
was
was.
his last gallery?
What?
His last gallery was at.
But where was his gallery when you were
At
with
the
him?
time was at Kurfürstendamm, Joachimthaler Straße, next to
Was it proper- was-
Mampes Gute Stube.
But was it a good shop? Was it a visible shop, or was it?
No, it was a back.
At the back, in the back.
Yeah, it was a court.
I think people in this are. How are we doing for time, by the way? Are we? I've lost my lot. You've got my only clock. So, what time is it now? 3:15. 3:15. So, how much more do we need to? Oh, should we do another 15
We don't-
minutes? What do we? Why do we go back to the?
I
Do we
tell
need to do generalizations?
you know, I made a preparation, one preparation for this.
Okay, well, give him. I give Michael Werner the floor.
It's a recent in a seminar a week ago about the art situation. There was a insurance who had made a seminar, and I picked these dates. It says about the art market, the turnovers in the world, total world, in 45 billion. In 17, 63 billion. In Germany, in 16,
2016.
1,045,000,000, which I think is a total invention. I don't think that the total turnover in 17 in Germany of the art business was 1 billion plus. It was, in my opinion, maybe 400 or so. But the discrepancy between the market, the total market, which is New York, Tokyo, whatever, London, and so, is enormous. And we talk here about the art business in Germany. It doesn't exist. And there are
Is that because of the law or because of taxes?
This is because of the psychology in Germany. Our representative who runs it's not a ministry, but it is a
Frau Grutas.
Yeah, it is. Well, I don't even know how they call this thing. It's an excuse. I was indirectly part of the foundation of this because I talked to Schröder, and it's a result of Schröder's doing. And I said we need somebody who coordinates the art world. But other people also had talked to him, and then in the end he did something good, which turns into a punishment machine for the art business, and and it's not even that; it's psychological because Mrs. Grutas believes, like many other representatives.
Is she here, by the way?
No, like other representatives, it's a social thing. Art dealers are more or less criminals, and they should not be allowed to do things.
Can I say my little thing before? Can I interrupt?
Yeah,
For
you
me,
can interrupt
the
me.
art market, for all its kind of maybe bad sides, is the principal mechanism for the preservation of art. Discuss. That's worthy of a seminar. The principal mechanism for the preservation of all art, old and new, is the art market. Discuss. Anyway, that's in parentheses.
Yeah, but
carry on.
But not only that, it's also something very interesting because you have to figure out, just imagine there are no art dealers. What would happen?
As I tell you, it would just go, everything would be mull, it would be rubbish. It would all so-called art production would be,
but
would not exist.
Yeah, but you talk about preserving art, which is like for the old art, for the art which is there. But what about the art art is, or anyway, probably it is a too complicated situation because when I started, it was forbidden to have national art. It is still in the official circles a little bit disgusting in Germany. And there the psychology problem starts. German art is a little bit, it's not like. And if I talk about German art, of course, it's a cutout. It's a painters, And this already is too much, It's widely a psychology thing that people think that art dealers do not contribute. They do not contribute, they just take away.
All the great discoveries in art have been made, who discovered Picasso? Art dealers, roughly speaking. I mean, who discovered, art has been discovered certainly not by museum directors, not even by critics, or I mean museum people. They've discovered very, very little. I would say that over the last century and a half, art is discovered either by artists or by art dealers, and usually by art dealers.
You forgot the critics.
I didn't forget them.
Because they disappeared, probably.
I mean, which critics have discovered art? Discovered art.
Well, discovering is
Somehow getting it together and, mediating it in a situation. Giving art giving unknown art. We all love the things we know, but to love the things we don't know or have never known before is another Schritt. Another step. Would you not agree with that?
sure, yeah. And
it is the art dealers who give platform for art. It's just a fact. It's a fact today, even today, and it's certainly a fact, over the last century and a half and more.
Why do you want to exclude the thinkers? The thinkers are very important.
Which thinkers?
The thinkers about art.
Well, but art dealers do think about art. The good ones think about art. Who are the thinkers about art that who are not art dealers?
Now you have to explain to me about the critics. What's wrong with them?
Well, tell me a great critic that has.
Everybody says Baudelaire. Huh?
I don't. Baudelaire also. He loved Manet, but he also loved a rather minor artist equally. And what's he called? The little fashion artist. What's he called? Well, he didn't just like Manet. He also liked equally a kind of completely minor artist whom he put onto a pedestal as well. Who did the little fashion plates.
Well, there are tons of interesting
Baudelaire's, of course,
critics.
An incredibly interesting person.
Let's forget about.
I don't think he discovered art.
Yeah, but discovering, I don't understand the word really. What is that, discovering art?
Well, it's just giving an individual who's, a vision of the world that is put either onto canvas or expressed in all sorts of different ways, whether it's in video or canvas, it doesn't really make it. But giving it platform.
No, you only put an artist in the reality by talking about the artist. That's all. That's all you can do.
But I don't quite fully agree, because in the end you have to exhibit in order to talk.
Yeah, you cannot talk without looking at the painting.
Yeah,
that's
so you have to give the artist a forum, and the gallery is the forum.
Yeah, but
or the space that it shows in. So artists themselves.
The British had great critics.
What?
The British had great critics. Really
Ruskin,
people who,
fantastic.
And if you do not like the sort of the.
I love to read Ruskin. Ruskin is one of the most amazing writers on art ever. But he's completely, I don't think he really discovered Turner.
You cannot. I am going to turn it around. You cannot discover anything in art if you do not have a system of thinking. Huh?
A system of thinking.
Yeah. This is what the big problem today is. There's total chaos. Nobody thinks anymore. Huh?
I think it's not entirely true. I think that's a subjective view.
You can call it subjective.
Do you think people thought more 40 years ago than they do now? I don't think that's entirely true.
Oh, sure. Remember the list of Mr. What was the founder of the MoMA? The first director of the MoMA. He invented all this.
Alfred Barr, yes.
Yeah. Many generations looked at that list and believed it. Don't you think there is a dialectic for a time where somebody says something and then the next one comes and says the opposite?
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's good. Then we agree.
Okay. But I'm not sure that, Alfred Barr also had to rely on what he was asked to look at. And what he was asked to look at was probably by a number of people who were connected with the art market.
Yeah, but I know what I'm missing. Last time I was in New York is about 7 years ago, and I made an appointment with Glenn Lowry. And and I had no reason to do that. For some reason, I was mad at him because he didn't buy something or so, Anyway, I really attacked him and told him that the big mistake of his regime is that he doesn't have a place for the artist in the MoMA. And it's a fact. It was a fact. And the MoMA suffers from that still, And if I say artist, because I'm Michael Werner, I talk about the painters, of course,
And the MoMA is a kind of mountain of 20th century, great so-called masterpieces, this unfashionable word, of 20th century art.
But Bryce Martin has to exhibit his new works at Larry Gagosian's. It's not at the moment. It used to be the MoMA, so there was a dialectic, and today it's no dialectic. The museums would propose something senseful, and they would create controversy and the living of the artists amongst each others also.
Yeah, certainly the Museum of Modern Art over a period of time played a very important role. But I would still say today that the important platforms for presenting art are, I'm afraid, in terms of, you may like Kiefer, you may not like Kiefer, but if you see the presentations of Kiefer that he's allowed in the very large galleries, no museum in the world would allow. And they are done exquisitely and with enormous taste. As a kind, they are, the dealers have now become the principal theatre of art, in the best sense of the word.
Well, I don't know. You want to exclude thoughts. You talk about Kiefer in the special issue of Blau.
I haven't seen it.
Oh,
describe it.
The Baselitz issue that you didn't see.
I wrote it a little.
Okay,
paragraph.
then you must have gotten it, and read the text of Kiefer about Baselitz. Did you?
Quickly,
You don't remember.
quickly.
What he says basically is, I always knew he's great, but now he's really great because he paints like me.
Well, that's the perversity of the individual.
This is a level.
That's an individual's perversity.
No. This is
That's
a reason.
not about thought. That's an individual's
Norman.
perfectly legitimate perversity. And perversity plays a very big role in art.
No, you misunderstand.
Perverse thinking, too.
You do not get what I mean. He's allowed to print this. That's a problem, the scandal. It's totally uninteresting, his opinion. And why is he allowed to print it? Because there is nobody who says anything interesting about art, about painting. I always have to.
Are you exclusively interested in painting at the bottom line?
Yeah,
and
from
maybe sculpture.
Yeah, als Notwehr. I had worked with non-painters, very interesting. James Lee Byers I took in the gallery because he was the most hated artist in America of the concept people, Carl Andre, Don Jat, and so they all said
rejected him,
he works for the CIA and bullshit like that, So this is the only reason I took him in the gallery, because I'm a lover of painting, and also I believe in it. I do not believe, we could do another thing and talk about the avant-garde, and the reason why it is like it is,
What do you mean, now and then, or, we've lived a long time. So, the avant-garde in the 70s and 80s is different to, if there is even such a thing as the avant-garde today, that's another subject for debate.
You're too diplomatic, Gordon.
Of course. And you are too undiplomatic, and that's your incredible strength and maybe a little weakness.
No, I only try to put arguments on the table and find people who have a counter argument, but even there I do fail. At least in your case.
Anyway, we'll somehow love each other.
Yes, sure,
And
absolutely.
we've loved each other for years, and somehow you've helped me hugely, and I've tried, with one or two little manifestations to make things not possible for you, but open one or two little doors. And it's been a great honor to work. And you've helped me hugely.
Gordon,
and I thank God you exist, is what I want to say.
Gordon, for my problem the painting of today. You did a big thing. You did new spirit of painting, which was laughed about, because he pulled out people like Picasso and
Balthus.
yeah,
Balthus.
it was almost that you did forbidden things.
Yeah, I did.
So that was great. So I'm not objecting.
Anybody got any questions for Michael? Come on, 3 questions or 4 questions we allow, not too many, and then I will have, I'm only here for another day and a few things I need to see, including, I've just been told of an exhibition about somebody I admire very much called Carl Einstein. You know whom I mean? And I just want to see this before I leave Berlin in case I don't come back. So I need to do that before I leave tomorrow morning. So you have a question?
Okay. My name is Maria Veronica. I come from Ecuador. I live in Dubai. And I just wanted to say that it is true, you cannot exclude thinkers and those people who really influence in the middle of the business. I have a question related to the...
Sorry, I have to interrupt. What is the definition of a thinker? Who is a thinker and who is a non-thinker?
You are a thinker.
Very nice, very flattering, but I'm not sure about that.
No, I was thinking about that. All the people that really have been moving the art history, but I think that he is the perfect one who explains better what is a thinker. I don't want to enter in any polemic, but I think that all of us will understand that the thinkers could be various identities, and they exist yet. We cannot exclude them. But I have a question related to the terrible and repeated art fairs subject. One thing is to work as a gallery independently. I know that you have been especially in Art Basel and in Art Cologne and once in the Fries. So my first question is, do you think that the future, how do you see the future of the art fairs? Do you think that
art fair?
Yes, the art fairs in general, and how sustainable in the difficult times of the world they could be, because we are not isolated. The world has political and sociological terrible problems. How do you see the future of this industry as art fairs? And the second one is, why you didn't come back to the Fries in London?
Why didn't you come back to?
To the Fritz, because he was participating
Why
once.
Why didn't you come back to the Freeze?
No, I just wanted to know.
I think I have to be very disappointing for you because I never thought about it. I'm not involved with this. Fair is, an art fair is a thing which exists. As long as it exists, you can go there and look or not. It's up to you.
What do you think about how they are managing this? How they
I
are
don't know.
constituting
I'm not a
them?
manager.
But you are part of it. I just wanted to clarify.
No, I'm really not. Personally, I always hated fairs. It's too public, and the fairs destroy the situation of the gallery. But I mean, it's not even worthwhile to say that because art fairs exist until they disappear. That's all.
Right, next question, please. As I said, 4 questions is what I'm going to allow, and then we're going to say.
Thank you very much. I would like to pick up the earlier, which is cut short, a little bit of the mentality and the perspectives about the.
Why don't you stand up so we can see you?
Yes, my name is Chen Yang, Chaos Chen from Beijing, former museum curator. My question, I would like to pick up the earlier point about the perspectives and the mentality of Germany. First of all, I would really like to comment about the, Mr. Werner said, the art market is almost non-existing. But as far as I know, German art has dominated, taking pretty much large sum of international trading. Even though they may not really happen here in Germany, contribute to the revenue here, but they are one of the most active art trading in the world for German art. But then the mentality part, which is also, I would like to know your opinion. I'm from East Asia. My understanding of the non-existing art market comes from my observation. It's really influenced by Protestant culture. And the other one, actually, I mentioned yesterday with Dr. Decker, it's this general rejection of trading, which is very, very well operated in Anglo-Saxon world. But in German field, German part of area, it seems to be fundamentally there. We're not really allowed open up spaces for trading. But I would also like to come down to another point. It's nowadays we have far more artists than before. Artists are participating in art trading way too early and way too directly. And I'm museum curator, so I work with artists very closely, and I witnessed the declining of the art creation's mature procedure. I think the whole ecology has a certain point that when we talk about art market, I'm fully support art market. I think artists were not really existing if the art market doesn't participate.
Please? Can you ask a question now? Ask a question in one sentence.
One sentence, yes. What will be our next solution for long-term sustainable structure for the whole circulation of art production, art thinking, growth of young artists in the world today?
All right.
With or without, and how to work with art market, and also with other things altogether. Thanks.
Yeah. Are you from China?
Yes, from Beijing. I used to
Yeah. You have still a chance, because you have probably a lot of I never was in China, I must say. I regret it, but I'm too old for that. But the thing is, you have probably a lot of universities, and the university mostly has a department of art history and all that. And you have a great past culture of painting. You have a great past. You have Chinese have a great past of painting, really important. And so you're relatively safe. Opposite to that, in Germany, you have a few old gentlemen, who pretend that art history is gone. They call it now picture science, because they want to exclude everything psychological out of their job, so to say. I never understood what they want, but I know it is not good, because I see all the young students who are art history, they don't get anything because they do not read old things, and I don't know what their future is. I have no idea. But, if it makes you feel good, I'm very positive for China.
Me too. But I think the other thing is, I once read in a book, and I wish I could find this reference. I must have read this book 30 or 40 years ago, and I just can't find it, and I wish I could find the reference. That in Paris, Michael's favorite city, in about 1870, there was a census taken, probably just after the founding of the Third Republic, maybe 1870, 1880. There were 40,000 individuals who registered themselves as artists. Well, if you're moderately well educated today, you will probably be able to recite 10 names, and if you're an art dealer, you might be able to add up, get to 20. And I think that's the same today. I think nothing will change in terms of what will sustain itself. There are thousands, there's a huge art industry out there. Everybody trying to make a little corner for themselves in the world of art, in every corner of the globe. But in the end, and there will be artists from China who will be remembered. And also there's a lot to do with locality and so on and so forth. But I mean, that's another whole discussion. But what will survive will be relatively little. Would you agree with that? He's nodding. There we are. Maybe I'm wrong.
Video.
Video. Okay, final question. The lady at the back.
There's one word you didn't
Can't
pronounce.
see you properly. Come on, come to the front and give your question.
Come
Otherwise
sit.
we can't hear properly. This
Come
light is
sit-
getting.
There is one
beginning to
word
get
which
too
was
hot
not
for me,
pronounced.
Which is why I want to end this whole thing. What?
There was one word you did not pronounce,
Come la fond of it.
both of you, which is the word public. And you were talking about the definition of art. What is an artist at the beginning? And you're now numbering the number of artists we may have. But doesn't the definition of Duchamp define what is an artist, which is the public? If an artist doesn't have a public, there is no art. Which brings me the difference between you two. You've been focusing on your public, which Mr. Werner calls the mainstream, and you didn't take care of the mainstream and the public because you take care of individuals as collectors. What is today, after your wonderful life, the definition of a public?
I do not think about the public. You know, that's the reason why I didn't mention the word. I think art is private. And everybody who wants to look at art is good, but if you want to persuade people to look at art, it's bullshit. Huh?
Here, here. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Norman. And thank you for your attention and your questions. And now we invite you to join for another glass of champagne just beside. Thank you.